One of the most underrated pleasures of a visit to the temples of Angkor is the soundscape. When you find a quiet spot, stop for a moment and listen. After 2 years without tourists, right now your chances of finding quiet spaces here are pretty good. I cannot tell you how privileged I feel to be sitting here this afternoon. This is the first time I've been outside Australia since the pandemic began, so it's a really special moment. And I have the incredible beauty of this temple. It's one of my favourites. And I have it to myself. I haven't seen another person apart from the security guards here. And to be able to walk here alone is just such a privilege. As a traveller, I have a sense that places have a presence, an atmosphere that reflects the past. I don't really care whether that presence is a creation of my imagination or something more intrinsic to the place. I do feel it, and it's an important part of the experience of travel. I sense that presence often. At historical sites where you know big things have occurred, at cemeteries, at indigenous sites, at old battlegrounds, at places of overwhelming natural beauty. But few places have a stronger sense of that presence than this place, the temples of Angkor, the most spectacular ruins anywhere that I know. A city of 1 million people in the 12th century, this was one of the largest and most prosperous civilizations in the pre-industrial world. Its territory extended from Cambodia through large parts of modern-day Thailand, Laos and Vietnam. These ruins are spread across hundreds of kilometres. Between 1100 and 1200, when many of these temples were built, this kingdom switched from Hinduism to Buddhism. The temples depict that evolution and the symbols that endured. Almost 30 years ago, I travelled to these temples for the first time. I was utterly captivated. Cambodia was emerging from a bloody war and the trauma of the Khmer Rouge's genocidal rule. I've revisited these temples most years since the early 90s, and each time my appreciation grows. Bringing visitors here for the first time and seeing their reactions is always a joy. Photographers find the temples especially inspiring. So I'd like to give you a sense of why, for me, the temples of Angkor are one of the world's most special places, and why now, as Cambodia emerges from the 2-year global pandemic, a rare experience awaits travellers. Let me start with the obvious. These are ruins monumental in scale. There are more than 70 structures, starting with the biggest, this one, Angkor Wat, and including many other grand structures in various states of ruin. Angkor Wat is the largest Hindu temple in the world and is said to be the largest religious structure too. The scale is impressive, but the detail that survives in each temple is where the magic lies. And there are many temples to get to know. They share elements, but they are distinct. On my recent trip, because of time constraints, I only visited a handful of old favourites. I still headed out to the temples 5 times over 5 days and loved every minute of it. The idea of a day tour to Angkor is as ridiculous as 30 minutes at the Vatican or the British Museum. You'll leave with no clue of what you've seen. Don't overdo it though. You're only good for 2 to 4 hours a day walking around these temples. That means that while you're in Siem Reap, you need to come back here for 3, 4, 5 half days and then spend the rest of your day chilling at a beautiful resort. For cooler temperatures and better light, come in the early morning or late afternoon. The hotel and resort situation in Siem Reap has been turned on its head during the pandemic, and we are busy updating our recommendations over at Rusty Compass. So head over to rustycompass.com for our recommendations, our independent recommendations of the best places to stay while visiting these magnificent temples. The setting for the Angkor temples is sublime. They continue to be shrouded in jungle as they have been for centuries. And that tussle between the jungle and the temples is one of the things that makes this place so magical. It's also one of the things that makes the protection of this place so challenging. And despite the millions of tourists that descend on this place each year in normal times, the whole World Heritage listed area is free of big commercial developments and hotels and resorts. That would be a miracle in most countries. In Cambodia, it's due to the love and commitment of local people who have fought to keep this place sacred. But local people also warn that the threat of commercial encroachment on this World Heritage listed precinct is ever present. And it's so nice to ride the bike around the temples, right?
Yeah.
Do you live in Siem Reap?
Yes, I live in Siem Reap.
Okay.
And where are you from?
I'm from Australia.
Oh, Australia.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
So how far did you ride today?
Around 50
50?
kilos.
Wow, that's a long ride. See you. Okun. Bye bye. Getting around Angkor is a delightful part of the experience. In recent years, I have taken to cycling out to the temples. The quality of the cycling paths keeps improving, and one of the things I noticed on my recent visit is that the locals have embraced cycling around the temples with great enthusiasm. How far are you cycling?
I do 40 kilometers.
So if you love cycling and you don't mind a bit of heat, I can recommend making bicycle your main form of transport in Angkor.
Around the temples every day?
You can check out our guide to cycling the temples of Angkor over at Rusty Compass. I've included the link below.
Very nice place to ride your bicycle. Okun. Bye bye. We ran free.
Tuk-tuks are the most popular way of exploring the temples, and the drivers are friendly and helpful and fantastic ambassadors for Cambodia. I've never had a bad tuk-tuk experience in Siem Reap. That said, Don't assume it can't happen. And if you want to be cautious, always get your tuk-tuk from your hotel. So there are lots of privileges about being in Siem Reap and Angkor Wat at the moment, and I've just discovered one that I hadn't really thought about, and that is, this man's just told me I am his first customer to the temples in 2 years.
Yes, for a long time, for 2 years ago. Now I meet you. I have you into my took me and take you to the Angkor Wat. I am very happy.
Mr. Chern was typical of the 4 or 5 tuk-tuk drivers I used during my stay in Siem Reap. They were all superb. And it felt good to be playing a tiny part in the post-crisis recovery. I've given these 2 essential pieces of advice about travel to Angkor Wat hundreds of times over the last 30 years. And the first piece of advice is that Angkor Wat is best visited over 3, 4, 5 days. It takes you that long to develop a real appreciation and a real affinity with the place. And then you will really start to enjoy the experience of being here even more. The second essential piece of advice is that probably your most rewarding experiences visiting temples will be at places like this. Not the big, most well-known, famous temples that are crawling with gazillions of tourists, but delightful places like this that have all of the gorgeous elements of the bigger temples, but that are usually pretty free of travellers, even during busier times. So even pre-COVID, I would come out to places like this and I would be astonished that I could have them to myself. Thank you for joining me for this little travel guide to the temples of Angkor. For more information, head over to rustycompass.com. We're in full update mode with so many countries reopening at the moment. And if you'd like to travel some more with us, you can click on the subscribe button or stay in touch with us over at rustycompass.com. If you'd like to join me in exploring the temples, I lead a few small groups each year around the temples and through Vietnam too. You can get more information on that over at allcompasstravel.com. And again, I have a link in the information below. Thanks very much and talk again very soon.